You want to view your business the way consumers are thinking about your category, not because it's easier for you to think about cola versus non-cola because that's how you've set up your business unit or that's how you've set up your brand team.
Hey, welcome to Unleashed. I'm your host, Will Bachman. Unleashed is produced by Umbrex, the first global community connecting top-tier independent management consultants with one another. If you are interested in connecting with other independent consultants to build relationships, share lessons learned, and explore ways to collaborate, email me at unleashed@umbrex.com. We just heard from today's guest, Rima Nair, a McKinsey alum who is a principal at IRI, a leading provider of big data, predictive analytics, and forward-looking insights that help CPG, retail, and media companies grow. In this episode, Rima explains why the largest consumer packaged goods companies subscribe to IRI's information sources and how the world of consumer insights is evolving. You can learn more about IRI at iriworldwide.com. And if you want to reach out to Rima, a link to her LinkedIn profile is in the show notes. Hello, Rima. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Will. Thank you for having me on.
So for listeners who are not familiar with IRI, let's start with just a general overview. Tell us, for someone who hasn't heard of the firm, tell us how would you describe IRI and give us a sense of the range of services that you offer your customers.
Sure. IRI stands for Information Sources Incorporated. We are headquartered in Chicago. We do have some businesses internationally as well, but the base business is obviously the U.S. We started life as a market research firm. We've been around since the 1980s, perhaps before. Started life with simply data collection and providing data to manufacturing clients. So very much a data supplier. Over time, this morphed into providing insights and analyses using that data. And then also now an overlay such as consulting using that data, since clearly CPG clients do not have the time to gather their own data or even spend time analyzing the data. They need somebody to do it for them and provide the insights and the recommendations in order to solve their business questions. We offer a wide variety of services. Obviously, now we don't want to be just known as a data supplier, so there's always subscription services surrounding panel data, which is perhaps our biggest or oldest subscription service. It's a joint panel with Nielsen, which you might have heard of in the market research space. Essentially, it is data that covers household purchases across the U.S., and we have a really robust panel in the U.S. We also have point of sale data to match with this panel data, and then a variety of subscription services that are overlaid on top of these. So just slicing and dicing the data every which way. There are different visualization tools and platforms that we offer. There are newer services such as e-commerce and surveys, specifically, with the changes in the industry around marijuana, cannabis, etc. All of that is also a new survey. There are ad hoc consulting projects also that we offer. Quite simply, any kind of business issue that the clients might have is something that we have the data for that we can leverage and aim to solve.
Let's dive into some of those areas. So panel data with household purchases, what sorts of information is in that and how do you get it?
Sure. So this started with providing scanners literally to a group of households right across the U.S. And so what occurs is when they do their purchasing and bring it home, they scan these products, and that is data that's collected in our panel. So we literally know, when the transaction occurred, where it occurred, what time of the day it occurred. The household is given a household ID. We know their zip code. We know what products they bought, how many units. They do input their own price. We know whether it was purchased on deal. There's a variety of measures really that are provided here in panel. The one advantage of panel over and above what the households are scanning or the primary shopper in the household is scanning is that these products are also coded in panel based on the product attributes. So, for example, we have a team that is responsible for coding. In other words, if you pick up, let's say a can of soda, that can of soda has a variety of attributes. One is packaging. The packaging is in can format. Two is the product type. It is a soda, so carbonated soft drink. It's coded under that product type. Then maybe it's a cola, so it's coded as a cola versus a non-cola. Maybe it has no fruit juice, so it's coded as 0% fruit juice. There's a variety of other such attributes that are available across all product types, across all categories. All of those are measured and coded in our panel data so that you're able to analyze the different attributes that make up these products. And again, slice and dice the data depending on what the client's business question is.
So the person and the household has to take a scanner and scan everything that they buy?
That's correct. Yes. So these are households that have been in our panel for a very long time. And essentially it's, the saying goes, if it's on the planet, scan it. So if the product has a barcode, they will scan it. Of course, now that problem has been compounded with all of this online shopping and, random weight and fresh produce and all that. So we have other data sources that take account of that. But just traditional packaged goods that are available on shelf that have a barcode that you can bring home and scan, those households do scan.
And what do the households get out of it? Like how much, do you pay them?
They are paid, yes.
So I'm just thinking about myself, about trying to do that practically in my life, like trying to scan everything that comes into my house.
I agree. Yeah, this is not something that, you or I would want to do now, right? But think about when this first started in the 1980s and when there really wasn't that much data to go around. And the best source of analysis really came from qualitative data. So all you could do was really, grab a random sample of the population and ask them what they bought and why they bought and trust that the answers they were giving you were correct and well thought out and honest, right? What panel data does is it takes that a step forward. So they don't have to tell us what they're thinking. They don't have to tell us why they're doing something. They just have to tell us, scan it and show what they did. So whether or not they remember and, whether or not you trust their memory, this is actual behavior. It's not claimed. It's not stated. It's actual behavior that's occurring in the market. And that actually, is perhaps IRI and Nielsen's biggest strength, the joint panel that they have, because it's been able to provide so much information to all of our CPG clients.
Okay. So there's some hardworking households out there in the U.S. where someone in the house is taking a scanner and scanning every barcode that enters that house.
Yeah.
Okay. And I imagine it must be difficult to get representation for some, socio-demographics, like,
Yes, fair point.
People,
yeah.
People.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Right. So what you see is that the panels tend to skew older, because they have more time to do things like this. So you'll find it a little bit underrepresented when you're talking about millennials and perhaps even Gen X.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So that's one big source of data is you have people, and is it like are people just using like an app on their phone now, or do they have a physical, actual kind of scanner like you'd find at the grocery store, sort of shooting and scanning all the barcodes coming in?
That's a great question. I do not know if that has been updated to an app to make it easier. I know that it literally used to be the scanner that you would see in a grocery store. I do not know if it has been updated to make it easier for them to scan products.
Okay, no worries. I always just ask the most trivial questions. Trying to imagine how that works. Okay, so that's one source of data. You have like people scanning all the stuff coming in their house. And
Right.
then point of sale data,
Yep.
how does that work? I guess you would buy it from the stores and the stores would let you, know, is it tied to a given credit card so you could tie back to a person? Like, tell me a little bit about what we would find if we started, exploring your point of sale data.
Right. I don't know the nitty gritty of the point of sale data, but I do know that both IRI and Nielsen have point of sales data, which they've had for a long time. The assumption here is that it's because it's disaggregated, right? It's easier to, I'm sorry, it's not disaggregated, it's aggregated data. So it is easier to get to data like this because you're simply looking at total sales of any product, right, in any category, and then summing it up for that category across the United States. And that's how you're getting to point of sales data. We do have, since you brought up the question of retail and credit cards, we do have separate shopper loyalty data, which takes into account a specific set of retailers and obviously the shoppers that shop there, right? And again, the purchases are linked to their shopper loyalty card. So we're able to get very granular there, especially when, panel data, somebody might buy fresh herbs or whatever, and they forget to scan it, or there is no barcode, whereas people who are regularly shopping at a Target, for example, and they tend to use Target for all their shopping purchases, you would be able to see, very granular level of data there and track that household across time. So smaller data sets certainly than panel, but because of fewer number of retailers, you also get more detail in what they're buying. And that's linked actually to their, sort of their loyalty program to understand what their purchases are. So it's sort of a subset of the panel data, except the collection occurs at the retailer in the store, as opposed to these people bringing it home and scanning it.
Okay, cool. Give me a sense of the types of clients that IRI serves.
Oh, these are varied. The bulk is certainly consumer packaged goods. Some certainly consumer durable goods, but it's perishable and non-perishable. So, from home care, health care, snacking, beverage, food companies, all of these fall under, the IRI banner.
And I think that you said before that IRI will kind of have a subscription services. Tell us some of those in terms of like what are the types of services that they offer as a subscription?
Right. So the panel data really, or even the POS, is where the subscription service comes in. So for certain clients, we maintain custom databases for them. So, just the way they like looking at their businesses. So let's say you're talking about a beverage company, right? And they make, carbonated beverages, and they make juices, and they make, let's say, sparkling waters. And they like to think of their businesses in these three different ways. So they would like for their databases to reflect that, whatever the internal hierarchy is within each of these product types, right? So if you start with carbonated beverages, they like to separate cola from non-cola. They like to separate underneath cola. They like to separate diet from regular. Then they want to look at it by package. So all of that custom hierarchy is built into the database that then becomes an ongoing subscription service for the client. What occurs with other ad hoc analyses is that we can use that database as well as IRI syndicated databases not maintained for any specific client, but available for purchase by any client on an ad hoc basis for whatever analysis they want. The analysis can then show that the database hierarchy that the client is thinking about is actually not the right way to think about, right? Because that's not how shoppers shop. Shoppers actually, and I'll just make this up, right? Shoppers actually rate the diet versus regular split higher than the cola versus non-cola split in carbonated beverages. So then that's how you want to view your business. You want to view your business the way consumers are thinking about your category, not because it's easier for you to think about cola versus non-cola because that's how you've set up your business unit or that's how you've set up your brand teams. And that then becomes, an example of a subscription service to provide to the client. Another is the shopper loyalty data. That's also a subscription service where they may be very interested in a certain geographic region. And, perhaps they intend to take their business there or launch new products in that area. And therefore, they want to maintain for the next year or two before they launch their new product. They would like to maintain the database there or understand just the dynamics of the market in that specific geographic region. And therefore, they would sign up for a subscription service in that geographic region from shopper loyalty data. So just, two examples of what subscription services you might have. The panel is perhaps the most common.
What you're saying there about the different ways to define the market really strikes me, is that sometimes you ask, like, what's the market size? And you got to ask, like, well, what do you mean by the market? I mean, do you want to get, soft drinks? Do you want to get diet soft drinks? Do you want to get diet cola soft drinks? Do you want to get diet cola fruit flavored soft drinks?
Right.
And it's an interesting idea to match it not to what is internally, but really to what, how consumers think about it.
Right.
And that's interesting. Like diet, so consumers think about really diet sodas as a category and not like colas as a category.
Oh, I just made that up.
Yeah.
I see. Just to say, like, if they're thinking about it differently than you as a manufacturer are, then clearly there's a disconnect, right?
Oh, right.
You can't run your business just because that was how you set it up, and therefore you're going to continue running the business that way.
Well, I mean, even if you were making that up, it applies to me. I mean, if I'm going to get a soda, which I try not to, but if I was, then I'm going to get like maybe a Diet Coke or a Diet Dr. Pepper.
Yes.
I'm not, so it's really a choice between something like that.
Yes.
So,
and we have seen actually that's a very, very strong preference among consumers. If they're the regular Coke drinkers, they're not touching anything but a regular carbonated beverage, right? They're not touching diet. And vice versa for those who like diet products only. So clearly there's some very strong loyalties in the market towards certain product types.
So so you talked about the service, like what is the typical questions that your clients are, working to answer with these information sources you provide?
Right.
Yeah. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I'll talk about this in the context of my team, perhaps, because it'll be
Let's do that.
easier to provide a concrete example.
Tell us about your team a little bit first. Let's give us a little intro on that.
Yeah. So we are part of the market and shopper intelligence vertical within IRI, and our specific vertical is the innovation and activation team. Yes, it's about innovation, and we're talking about, how do you go figure out white space opportunities for your clients to take their businesses into, but it's also very much about understanding what the current landscape is for their businesses and what's going on. So let's take the example of beverage, since we've been talking about sodas. If you're talking about a beverage, then and you have a juice firm come to you and say, well, we need to understand what's going on in our business and we'd like to have our brand grow and launch new products, but where should we go? Should we go into sparkling juice? Should we go into sparkling water? Should we go into dairy alternatives, smoothies? Where can we take this juice equity? And if you just analyze the juice market, then all you're doing really is growing share within that market. Whatever strategies you come up with will all relate to growing share within the juice market. But if you think broadly in terms of beverage and say, well, juice is just one item among beverages, right? This giant world of beverages, then where does juice sit? And what are the adjacencies to juice? How are consumers viewing this market? Are they looking at juice as, light juice versus regular juice, or are they thinking about it in terms of the juice type? Orange juice is very different from all other juices. Or are they thinking about the mixers for alcohol separately? Where does juice really fit in this landscape, right? Where would milk be? Where would milk substitutes be? Where would ready-to-drink tea and coffee be? Because ready-to-drink tea also has juice flavors. Once you understand that lane of the landscape and say, this is how shoppers are thinking about the market. This is how beverages are clustering in the market, right? These product types cluster together, those product types cluster separately. Then you understand what are complementary clusters in the market. In other words, what products are providing complementary benefits to other product types, right? So you'll have let's say, 3 or 4 groups of clusters in the market, each providing a unique and complementary benefit to the other. So the same household, for example, might buy orange juice as well as coffee, as well as tea, as well as almond milk, right? All for different occasions or perhaps even for different people in your household, but they're still being purchased by the same household. So clearly they're meeting very different needs. They're all complementary needs, but they're meeting very different needs. On the other hand, if you're looking at 2 brands of oranges, that's when you're getting into substitutable behavior, right? A shopper has a preference for only Tropicana oranges over Dole or Minute Maid or whatever other brand of oranges there might be in the market, right? That's when you're getting into, do I pick brand A or do I pick brand B? And that's also important to know because you need to know who your immediate competitive set is. If you're going to launch a new product in the market, you want to know where that volume is going to come from, right? Whom are you going to hit most in order to get that volume? You really don't want to be cannibalizing yourself and, getting this big surprise because, hey, guess what? We stole volume from our own brand. You really want to be launching in a space where you currently don't play so that whatever volume you get is incremental to your portfolio, right? Any new brand or even a brand extension that you have in any other space is incremental to your portfolio. So that's essentially the service we provide, and there's a lot of additional pieces that can be added to it. So it's completely customized to the client's business questions. And the kinds of business questions then are, can you help us forecast, what my size of price is? So I know what this landscape looks like. I know what beverages look like, but I'm a juice firm. What if I decided to get into sparkling water and, sweeten it with juice because I do have the manufacturing capacity for that, right? The capability for that. Can you tell me what my size of price will be? And we're able to do that. We're able to forecast based on the landscape that we have because you can look at point of sales data and say, well, here's the size of that sparkling water segment. And if you get a new product in it, it's the nth brand in, so it'll get X% share. These are all the attributes the new product is expected to have. It's providing some kind of new, unique benefit to consumers. So perhaps it's above par compared to other products in it, that are on the same shelf as it will be. And this is where it will source volume from. And here's how incremental it'll be to, the juice portfolio, right? We're able to do that as well. And sometimes it's just a question of, hey, we don't think we can do anything more here, but how do we continue to just grow share in our own category, right? We're in a maintenance game. What is it that we can do, and you just say, okay, so here you are in the space and who are the competitors you've got to watch out for, and you just play the maintenance game with one brand and ride the other brand into new areas that you currently don't compete in. So it's a variety of business questions that we get from clients, not just about we want to innovate, but also, we need to understand where we are now because consumer behavior keeps changing and not changing fast, but it does change, certainly over 5 years. So we need to understand the shift in behavior and whether we're seeing these concrete shifts in their purchasing power as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Could you walk me through a sample engagement that your team, has done? Obviously sanitize it, but just kind of walk me through the stages.
So here's an example. We got a question from a client that had done some exploratory work on traditional milk and milk substitutes and said, you know what, we think this is an interesting space. We'd like to launch a new product, a new brand in this dairy alternative space. And we know that there's soy milk and almond milk and cashew milk and coconut milk and all that out there, but we'd like to launch it. But we need to understand what the landscape is now. So they've done whatever numbers they've run, and they decided this was the space that they wanted to look at. So we said, sure, we'll examine the landscape for you. So we pulled into the hopper traditional dairy milk and half, and evaporated milk and condensed milk and all of these milk substitutes and, protein shakes and yogurt drinks and whatever else that might have something around milk or milk substitutes in it. And we said, let's see how consumers view this. And what we found was that, traditional milk is very distinct from all of these plant-based milks, but consumers were taking it one step further. sheep milk, goat's milk, camel milk, all of this, non-cow's milk is still considered, coming from an animal. It's not plant-based, but it all clustered with plant-based milk. Basically saying that what's driving consumers is not that the milk comes from a cow or from an animal versus from a plant. What's driving consumers is the digestive health benefit, the anti-inflammatory benefits that they're getting from these non-traditional milks than they are from traditional milk. They're giving up traditional milk because it's been around forever, right? You automatically gravitate towards it when you're a child, when you have a child, right? The reason to give it up is because of health benefits, because of lactose intolerance, or for some other health issue that you're trying to control. And it was that was driving consumers towards plant-based milk. So it wasn't that consumers were giving up traditional milk totally. They were also buying plant-based milk, in addition to traditional milk. And that was a huge, surprise finding for the client, because they were assuming, they're leaving one to go to the other, right? And behavior is never that quite simple when you're looking at consumers, right? I mean, they're not just saying, I'm going to give this up and pick up something else. They're also trying things. They're switching between things. They go back to certain things after a while. So behavior is changing in different ways because there are that many more choices available to them, that many more products available to them. So when we figured this out, obviously we started with a proposal and a kickoff. We figured out the analysis. We took these recommendations to the clients and we said, well, here's what we found out. And that enables them to think about their product in a more concrete manner. It enables them to think about what the messaging should be for the product. How should you target your consumer? What are the consumers? Who's your target here, right? You can't forget the boomers because they do have purchasing power. On the other hand, you don't want to lose the millennials because of their growing purchasing power. So how do you go after both? Should you go after both? What should you say about your product, right? What should you call out on packaging to attract the right kind of consumer? So after all of this, and this, of course, took several weeks, several meetings in between to bring the client along on this journey. And then at the end of it is when they shared with us their concept, what they were planning to introduce into the market, and said as they crystallize the concept, they would like for us to forecast that. And at some point then, we'll be ready to forecast for them this new product that they've come out with as they're, working on tweaking whatever their planned distribution is or planned pricing or whatever's still going on in R&D. They thought that they would be ready to launch, but they weren't quite yet, and they had some more tweaks to do in R&D before getting the product out. So, it's essentially soup to nuts. We could forecast it for them, and they could also do, store testing to see if we actually got a prototype out on shelves. Would consumers buy this? Would they actually respond to it the way we want them to respond? So that, in a nutshell, is how a typical engagement would go about 8 to 10 weeks, longer, depending on how many additional work streams they might have us working on with respect to this.
What do you see as some of the kind of cutting edge, new emerging approaches to gathering these types of consumer insights?
I'd say e-commerce is a big one because there's this huge flux of, purchasing now online, right? I mean, it's not just people buying diapers and paper towels. It's perishable goods also, right? Nobody wants to drive to the store anymore to buy this big gallon of milk. People are getting it all delivered at home. So certainly that's become a bigger piece of the puzzle. And it's important to clients to know whether consumers are behaving differently when they shop online, or is the behavior pattern still the same? It's just that the brands available online might differ than the brands available at a brick and mortar store. So you're still following your same logic in your decision-making process. It's just that the choices available to you might differ in terms of brand. Or is it significantly different because, for whatever reason, online you think differently than, when you're in the store? So I would say e-commerce is certainly a big piece of the puzzle, trying to understand this. Digital marketing, that's another one that we've been asked about very often. What do we do? How can you include that in any forecasting work, right? It's very easy to forecast, or rather, it's straightforward to forecast when you're thinking about traditional items like traditional marketing levers, like the price of the product, the number of items you will have on shelf for the product, the planned media spend for the product. What does the product look like, the image, the description, and then where is the product going to be launched, right? Is it going to be national, etc.? All of that. How much support are you going to provide product, etc. Right? Those are very straightforward marketing inputs. But what about word of mouth, Instagram, right? One great example is Halo Top. Halo Top went from nowhere to $300 million plus last year.
I'm sorry,
right?
what's that product again?
Halo Top ice cream.
What is that? Halo what?
Halo Top ice cream. It's a brand.
Uh-huh.
And yes, I had to go to my local Jewel to look for it, and I found it, and I said, I never even noticed this. I knew Ben & Jerry's, I knew Haagen-Dazs, I knew, about Dove, I knew a bunch of other ones, and all of a sudden there's this new brand sitting in the freezer section called Halo Top ice cream. And they are one of the few brands that blew past the $100 million mark quite easily. They had distribution issues early on, but once they figured that out, they grew by word of mouth. They spent like maybe $4 million on advertising, which is ridiculously low in these days, but they grew because of Instagram. And because, they touted the number of calories in that one pint. So it was pretty much, you can go until your spoon hits the bottom of the cardboard carton. And they called out the protein on the packaging. And so when you think about things like this, there are lots of products now that are blurring category boundaries, right? They're breaking the traditional mold of, when you spend heavily, like the big Cokes and Pepsis and Campbell's and Clorox and all of these other firms, the amount they spend, these little brands are not spending that much. And yet they are breezing past the $100 million mark. So clearly the rules have changed. And that becomes an important thing to consider when you're doing any kind of analysis.
That's amazing. Instagram, protein.
Yeah. Instagram. Yes, Instagram is what helped Halo Top get to $300 million plus. Literally $4 million in traditional advertising.
Wow. That's incredible. They must have a pretty good Instagram social media manager at that firm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so e-commerce, and you mentioned, questions around do customers behave differently online? Is that something that you find? Do people shop differently?
No, not really. I haven't done it for a variety of categories, just a few. But what I've seen is that the behavior remains the same, right? If I'm buying a certain product, there are going to be certain attributes that are very important. One, am I buying it for my entire household or for myself? That will determine size. I might also want to know whether I buy a certain flavor because that's what my household prefers. And then there might be a certain brand that I am loyal to, or brand is less important because there are so many brands that offer the same flavor. And therefore, I'll pick brand the last. That decision hierarchy tends to remain the same whether you're buying online or not. It's just that whatever you're seeing online, some brands don't have that much presence online, and some brands do. And so you're restricted to your choices when you're buying online. But you're not going to, make any major changes in behavior, because there are certain needs that have to be met for your family or for yourself.
How do you personally kind of stay in touch with the latest trends in your industry? Do you spend much time going to in-person to conferences or events, or are there online digital trade journals that you follow? Like, how do you keep up to date of what's going on?
Great question. I read as much as I can, so Mintel reports, We try to share articles, internally, whoever's read something interesting, share that. Any kind of thought leadership white papers put out there by anyone in our industry, once they're circulated, and we can get our hands on them, we certainly do read them. I have not been to too many trade shows or conferences or whatever, but certain other senior leaders in the firm do attend these, and then those webinars become available to everyone else. IRI has an online IRI University, just sort of a nice hub for all of these articles and white papers, etc., to be stored so that you can go and read them at your leisure. We do have an annual conference. I went last year and this year also to our IRI Summit, which is where, you not only showcase what IRI has to offer, but you're also networking with clients and other industry professionals to understand what their business issues are, what new things they've come up with, and what interests them. What, their business issues might have changed over the years, and it's because of some new dynamic in their markets. And, access to that certainly helps in trying to stay abreast of current events.
Yeah. For you personally, Rima, any practices that you've adopted maybe a long time ago, maybe last week, that you found really help your productivity or effectiveness?
I can't think off the top of my head about any practices that we've adopted. No, I think really the place where I found we've gained the most efficiencies is in automation. So the more we've been able to automate certain pieces of the process, the better it has been, because you're taking human error out of the equation. And you're also able to cut down time, of course, of analysis. And then you're also able to focus on really what matters, right? What's the output of this and what's the insight that you can provide to the client. Those really are where I have seen the biggest gains for our business.
Fantastic. Well, Rima, this was really informative. I didn't know about this world, and it was really interesting to hear about IRI's business. Thank you so much for joining.
Great. Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is sponsored by Umbrex, the world's first global community of top-tier independent management consultants. The mission of Umbrex is to create opportunities for independent management consultants to meet, share lessons learned, and collaborate. I'd love to get your feedback and hear any questions that you'd like to see us answer on this show. You can email me at unleashed@umbrex.com. That's UMBREX.com. If you found anything on the show helpful, it would be a real gift if you would let a friend know about the show and take a minute to leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And if you subscribe, our show will get delivered to your device every Monday. Our audio engineer is Dave Nelson. Our theme song was composed by Gary Negbauer, and I'm your host, Will Bachman. Thanks for listening.